Another problem for a 3 by 3 or 3 by 4, sorry. X plus 2y minus 3z equals 9. 2x minus y plus 2z equals to a negative 8. 3x minus y minus 4z equals to 3. So the first thing, we make the matrix, remember? So all of our x's, 1, 2, 3, 2, negative 1, negative 1, negative 3, 2, negative 4, 9, negative 8, and 3. So this is the matrix. We don't need to interchange because we already have a 1 here, and just to remember, this is what we want. This is our goal, to make it look like this. We need our diagonal of 1s with those zeros below. So we already have the 1. I need to make this 2 into a 0. So the rows to that is multiply the row that has a 1, which is row 1, by the opposite of the number you're trying to make a 0. So the opposite of a 2 is a negative 2, and add it to the row where you're wanting to make that 0. There it is. So my row 2 becomes negative 2 times the row 1 plus my row 2. Negative 2 times my row 1 plus my row 2. Negative 2 times my row 1 plus my row 2. Negative 2 times my row 1 plus my negative plus my row 2. So a top one did not change, so I'm going to keep it the same. 1, 2, negative 3. The bottom one, 3, negative 1, negative 4. So for the middle, we just type them into the calculator. So I have negative 2 times 1 plus 2, which is a 0. Negative 2 times 2 plus a negative 1 is negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 3 plus 2, which is an 8. Negative 2 times 9 plus a negative 8, which is a negative 26. So that's our first step. Then I have to make this one a 0. So then the one that has a 1, which is row 1 again, multiply times the opposite of this, which is a negative 3, and add it to the row where you're trying to make the 0, which is the third row. We don't do anything to the first one or the second one, but I do have negative 3 times row 1 plus your row 3, negative 3 times my row 1 plus my row 3, negative 3 times row 1 plus my row 3, negative 3 times row 1 plus your row 3. First two did not change, so I'm going to rewrite them. 1, 2, negative 3, 9, 0, negative 5, 8, negative 26. Grab the calculator. Negative 3 times 1 plus 3, it's a 0. negative 3 times 2 plus a negative 1, negative 7, negative 3 times a negative 3 plus a negative 4, positive 5, negative 3 times 9 plus 3, a negative 24. So those are your new numbers. Now here, 1, 0, 0, perfect. The next thing is we have to make this one into a 1. So how do you make something a 1? Multiply that row. So I have to multiply row 2 by the reciprocal of a negative 5, which will be a negative 1/5. So negative 1/5 times 0, negative 1/5 times a negative 5, negative 1/5 times 8, and a negative 1/5 times a negative 26. First row did not change. 1, 2, negative 3, 9, 0, negative 7, 5, negative 24, and the bottom one did not change also. Now, negative 1/5 times 0 is 0. Negative 1/5 times negative 5 is a 1. Negative 1/5 times 8 is a negative 1.6. So this is a 0, this is the 1. You could write it down because this times this becomes a negative 8/5. 8 divided by 5, there it is, your 1.6. Of course it's a negative. This number goes on top. 1/5 times 8 is 8/5. This one is a positive 26/5. Because remember, you put this over 1, top with top, bottom with bottom. Now I have to make this guy a 0. How do you make it a 0? Taking the row with the 1, which is row 2, because of the column we're in. So row 2 times the opposite of this, which is a 7, plus my row 3. So I have 7 times 0 plus 0, 7 times 1 plus a negative 7, 7 times, let me white out, sorry, 7 times row 2, which is a negative 8/5, plus row 3, 7 times 26/5 plus a negative 24. Top 2 stay the same. Now, do not be afraid of fractions or decimals. Sometimes your answers will be that, but sometimes they end up canceling in a little bit. So here we go. 7 times 0 plus 0, 0. 7 times 1, 7, plus a negative 7, 0. This here, and I'm just going to do the math coming up, it's a negative 56/5 plus 25/5, which is a negative 31/5. Now, let me just input this. 7 times negative 8/5 plus 5. It's a negative 6.2. I'm going to keep it here just so you know what's going on. 7 times 26 over 5 plus a negative 24. My answer is 12.4. It'll be easier to work with decimals probably. Alrighty. Now, I have to make this one into a 1 now. If I'm going to be working with a decimal, what is the reciprocal of negative 6.2? It's going to be 1 over negative 6.2 times row 3. So that means 1 over negative 6.2 times 0, 1 over negative 6.2 times 0, 1 over negative 6.2 times negative 6.2, 1 over a negative 6.2 times 12.4. So if you use decimals, just understand when you have the decimal of a negative 6.2, the reciprocal will be a fraction of 1 over negative 6.2. So this is 0, this is 0. Top two rows stay the same. 1, 2, negative 3, 9, 0, 1, negative 8 over 5, 26 over 5. This is 0, this is 0. And just so we see, 1 divided by a negative 6.2 times a negative 6.2 is a 1. 1 divided by a negative 6.2 times 12.4, the answer is a negative 2. Once we get to this part, remember we have 3 situations. I have 1x plus 2y minus 3z equals to 9. Y minus 8 over 5z equals 26 over 5. And z equals negative 2. So that one's already done. I take this one, plug it in here. Y minus 8 over 5 times a negative 2 equals 26 over 5. So negative 8 divided by 5 times a negative 2 is 3.2. Y plus 3.2 equals to that. Subtract 3.2, subtract 3.2. Y equals 26 divided by 5 minus 3.2. My answer is a positive 2. So there's your answer. I have 2. These 2 we plug in here. X plus 2 times y. Y was what? Positive 2. Minus 3 times z, which is a negative 2, equals to 9. X plus 2 times 2 is 4. Negative 3 and the negative 2 is a positive 6, equals to 9. X plus 10 equals 9. Subtract 10, subtract 10. 9 minus 10 is a negative 1. So my answer, negative 1 to negative 2. Now, the next problem we're going to do is a special case. And we'll see why. Problem C. 3x minus 4y minus z equals 6. 2x minus y plus z equals negative 1. 4x minus 7y minus 3z equals to 13. So my matrix, 3, 2, 4, negative 4, negative 1, negative 7, negative 1, positive 1, negative 3, 6, negative 1, 13. So there's nothing we could interchange here. So we need to start with working by making that into a 1. How do we make it a 1? By multiplying row 1 by the reciprocal. Now this is going to be your new row 1. I was not putting this in the previous problems. I don't know if it's going to help or not. So 1/3 times 3, 1/3 times negative 4, 1/3 times negative 1, 1/3 times a 6. So the bottom 2 rows stay the same. One-third times 3, 1. This becomes a negative 4/3. This becomes a negative 1/3, and this becomes a positive 2. Check your multiplication posit with your calculator. So now that that's a 1, I need to make this guy into a 0. So we take the row that has the 1, row 1, because we're in the first column, times the opposite of this, that we're trying to make a 0, plus that row, and that of course is going to be my new row 2. Negative 2 times 1 plus 2, negative 2 times negative 4/3 plus a negative 1, negative 2 times a negative 1/3 plus 1, negative 2 times 2 plus a negative 1. So my top row doesn't change. So let's see what I get here. Negative 2 times 1 plus 2 is 0. Very good. Negative 2 times negative 4 divided by 3 plus a negative 1. I get this. We could change it to a fraction if you're using the other one is math enter. Here we'll do this, but I don't think it is. Hold on. Give me 1 second. So I get this. I need to go this fraction. So I get 1 2/3. But if I want an improper, 5/3. It's a little bit more complicated with that, of course. If we do it by hand, it's a lot easier. But negative 2 times a negative 1/3 plus 1, it's the same thing. So it's 5/3. Negative 2 times 2 plus a negative 1, which is a, hold on. So the negative 5, very good. So now that that's a 0, I need to make this guy a 0. So we're still working with row 1 because we're in the first column. Opposite of 4, negative 4 plus row 3. This is going to be my new row 3. So I have negative 4 times 1 plus 4, negative 4 times negative 4/3 plus a negative 7, negative 4 times negative 1/3 plus negative 3, negative 4 times 2 plus 13. 1, negative 4/3, negative 1/3, 2, 0, 5/3, 5/3, negative 5, negative 4 times 1 plus 4 is 0. Let me see. negative 4 times negative 4 divided by 3 plus a negative 7. Your answer is that. That's a negative 5/3. Negative 4 times a negative 1/3 plus a negative 3 is also a negative 5/3. And a negative 4 times 2 plus 13, my answer is a positive 5. So we have accomplished 1, 0, 0. I need to make this into a 1. And the way we do that is by multiplying that whole row by the reciprocal of 5/3, which is 3/5 times row 2. And this is to make a 1. So 3/5 times 0, 3/5 times 5/3, 3/5 times 5/3, 3/5 times a negative 5. So there is a lot of work for problems 2, 3, 4, and 5. You have to do this. Work slowly but surely. This remains a 0. This becomes a 1. This becomes a 1. And this becomes a negative 3. So I have done what I need to. But now I have to make this guy into a 0. How do you make it a 0? Multiply your row 2 times the opposite of this, which is a positive 5/3, and then add it to row 3. So I have 5/3 times row 2 plus row 3. 5/3 times row 2 plus row 3. 5/3 times row 2 plus row 3. Five-thirds times row 2 plus row 3. So the first two stay the same. So 5/3 times 0 plus 0 is still 0. 5/3 times 1 plus a negative 5/3 is, 5/3 times 1 plus a negative 5/3 is 0. And these two are the same, so this is a 0. 5/3 times negative 3 plus 5, my answer is 0. So this is a special case. Whenever you get the bottom row where they're all zeros, these are the steps you have to take. Well, first, yes, this is my equation. X plus negative 4/3 y minus 1/3 z equals to 2. This one is y plus z equals to a negative 3. And then this one, anytime, hope you're listening, anytime you get a row of all zeros in the bottom, that is just z. That's my answer. Now here I have to solve for y in terms of z. So I subtract z, y equals negative z minus 3. This is my answer right there. Then I have to solve this one here. But in order to make this easier to work with, I'm going to get rid of all those fractions. by multiplying the entire thing by 3. So I get 3x minus 4y minus 1z equals to 6. So by multiplying by 3, because that's your denominator, this looks a lot better. I have to solve this for x in terms of z. So all your answers are going to have a z. So I'm going to have to first of all replace the y with this. 3x minus 4 times negative z minus 3 minus z equals to 6. 3x plus 4z plus 12 minus z equals to 6. Combine your c's. 3x plus 3z plus 12 equals to 6. Subtract 3z. Also subtract 12. Move both to the other side. So I have 3x equals negative 3z. 6 minus 12, negative 6. Divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3. X equals negative z minus 2. So my answer would be negative z minus 2, comma, negative z minus 3, comma, z. I know this looks weird and different. So anytime that you have a bottom row of all zeros, your answer is going to look like this. This means that you have infinitely many solutions. Infinitely many solutions. So let's go ahead and do another one. I think this is D. So let's say we had x plus y plus z equals 9. X minus y minus z equals negative 15. 3x plus y plus z equals to 2. So let's go ahead and do our matrix. 1, 1, 3. 1, negative 1, 1. 1, negative 1, 1. 9, negative 15, and 2. So we already have a 1, so we don't have to worry about that. But now we have to make this guy a 0. How do we do that? Multiply your first row times the opposite of this and add it to row 2. So negative 1 times 1 plus 1. Negative 1 times 1 plus a negative 1. Negative 1 times 1 plus a negative 1. Negative 1 times 9 plus a negative 15. So let's go ahead and start calculating this. Negative 1 times 1 plus 1 is a 0. Negative 1 times 1 plus a negative 1, negative 2, and this one's the same. Negative 1 times 9 plus negative 15, negative 24. This stays the same. This changes. There it is. So now we have to make this guy a 0. So negative 3 times row 1. Row 1 times the opposite of this, plus your row 3. So negative 3 times 1 plus 3. Negative 3 times 1 plus 1. Negative 3 times 1 plus 1. Negative 3 times 9 plus 2. So negative 3 times 1 plus 3, 0. Negative 3 times 1 plus 1, negative 2. That's also a negative 2. negative 3 times 9 plus 2, negative 25, 0, negative 2, negative 2, negative 24, 1, 1, 1, and 9. Perfect. So 1, 0, 0. Make this guy into a 1. So we multiply times the reciprocal. Negative 1/2 times 0. Negative 1/2 times negative 2. Negative 1/2 times negative 2. Negative 1/2 times negative 24. So this is a 0. This is a 1. This is a 1. And this becomes a 12. Now I have to make this guy a 0. So row 2 times the opposite of this, which is a 2, plus row 3. 2 times 0 plus 0. 2 times 1 plus negative 2. 2 times 1 plus negative 2. 2 times 12 plus a negative 25. So this is a 0. This becomes a 0. This becomes a 0. 2 times 12 plus a negative 25. 2 times 12 plus a negative 25. This becomes a negative 1. 0, 1, 1, 12, 1, 1, 1, 9. So our next goal was supposed to make this guy a 1, but that's impossible. When you end up with a problem like this, where it's 0, 0, and a number, you can't get an answer. It's not infinitely many. This one's going to be a no solution, and you are done. That's it. The problem stops right there. The problem stops right there. Okay? Let's do one last one. X plus y plus z equals to 1. X plus 2y plus 3z equals to 4. 4x plus 5y plus 6z equals to 7. We do our matrix. 1, 1, 4, 1, 2, 5, 1, 3, 6, 1, 4, 7. We already have a 1 up there, so let's make this guy into a 0. Negative 1 times row 1 plus row 2. So negative 1 times row 1 plus row 2. 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 Negative 1 times 1 plus 1. Negative 1 times 1 plus 2. Negative 1 times 1 plus 3. Sorry, my bad. Negative 1 times 1 plus 3. Negative 1 times 1 plus 4. The other two stay the same. Now I have to make this one a 0. Row 1 times the opposite of 4, which is a negative 4, plus the row 3. So negative 4 times 1 plus 4. Negative 4 times 1 plus 5. negative 4 times 1 plus 6, negative 4 times 1 plus 7. So negative 4 times 1 plus 4, negative 4 times 1 plus 5, negative 4 times 1 plus 6, negative 4 times 1 plus 7. Copy the other ones. Now I need to make this one a 0. So my row 2, because now I'm in column 2, times a negative 1 plus row 3. Negative 1 times 0 plus 0, negative 1 times 1 plus 1, negative 1 times 2 plus 2, negative 1 times 3 plus 3, negative 1 times 0 plus 0 is 0, negative 1 times 1 plus 1, 0, negative 1 times 2 plus 2, 0, negative 1 times 3 plus 3, 0. So I ended up with the whole bottom row being a 0. So that tells me this is going to be an infinitely mini. So I have to continue. How do I continue? Remember my first equation, x plus y plus z equals to 1. Y plus 2z equals to 3. And the last one is just a z. So x plus y plus z equals 1. Y plus 2z equals to 3. So this is done. I have to solve this for who? For z. Solve for y in terms of z. So I have to subtract the 2z, subtract the 2c. That crosses out. Y equals negative 2z plus 3. I'm done. Whatever you get here, anytime for y, you're always going to have to come back and plug it in here. So this becomes x plus negative 2z plus 3 plus z equals to 1. X, when I have this negative 2z and the positive c, that becomes a negative z plus 3 equals to 1. I add z, we move it to the other side. X plus 3 equals z plus 1. I subtract 3, and I get x equals z, 1 minus 3, negative 2. So my answer would be z minus 2, negative 2z plus 3, and z. So when it's infinitely many, your answers are all going to have z's. So I need you to understand that. When the bottom row is 0, 0, 0, 0, is infinitely many. And you have to keep going until you get answers with z. If my answer is 0, 0, 0, and any number, it doesn't matter, then this is a no solution. But if I get a 0, 0, 1 with a number, then this is where you're going to end up with x, y, and z. Like the very first two examples. So these are the 3 different situations that we have covered.